My name is Nathan Cortez. I'm the sitting governor of Colorado. I write laws now. I sign bills. My name headlines op-eds. But 15 years ago, my family threw me out like I was a stain they couldn't scrub clean. They told people I failed. They whispered that I was unstable. They said I embarrassed the Cortez name. They shut the door behind me without bothering to lock it because they knew I wouldn't come back. And they were right. I never did. Until today, I'm standing at the back of a courtroom in San Antonio. It's colder than it should be for Texas. Maybe it's the air conditioning, or maybe it's the silence. Everyone's watching the front row where my brother Ethan Cortez sits in a dark suit that no longer makes him look powerful. He used to be the family's golden child, district attorney, hero of every Sunday dinner, the one my father raised his glass to. Today, he's the defendant. He's being charged with evidence tampering, suppressing key files in an immigration case that led to a wrongful deportation. A woman was separated from her 6-year-old daughter for almost 2 years because of that decision. And my brother told the press it was just a clerical error. I take my seat. No security. No cameras. No one knows I'm here yet. The judge walks in. Black robe. No nonsense. Her eyes sweep the room, then pause, then narrow. She squints, then leans forward ever so slightly. "Wait," she says. "Is that Nathan Cortez?" The governor. Heads snap around. Reporters whip out phones. A ripple of sound surges across the room. My mother, 2 rows ahead, freezes. Her hand moves to her chest like someone just stabbed her in the lungs. My brother turns. His face folds. Not in fear. Not in guilt. In disbelief. And for the first time in 15 years, the room that once erased me stopped. Even my mother couldn't speak. I didn't come here to be seen. But being seen feels a lot like justice. I didn't fall. That's the part people get wrong. I was pushed. And the worst part, they didn't push me to protect themselves. They did it because they thought I was already broken, disposable. It started with a text. Just one. "Yo, you've seen Twitter, yet I hadn't. I was in my final semester. Political science, honors, interning at the city council office. But by the time I opened my laptop, it was already out of control. A video. Spring break. Me, in someone else's house. Shirtless. Drunk. Kissing someone on a couch that didn't belong to either of us. What the video didn't show, that it was filmed without my knowledge. That the person holding the phone was my ex. That I said no when he asked if he could share it. Didn't matter. The title under the video said Cortez Family's Dirty Secret. 2 million views in 48 hours. I hadn't even processed it before my brother Ethan called. Dad saw it. "You need to come home. Now. Not. Are you okay?" Not what happened. Just an order. I did go home. I don't know why. Maybe I thought. No. I know what I thought. I thought they'd believe me. I walked into the living room, and Dad was already standing arms crossed, like a judge waiting for a guilty plea. "You think this is what we raised you for?" he asked. He threw my diploma on the floor. "You want to embarrass this family, then do it without my name, without my roof, without my money." I said I didn't post it. I was the one violated. He pointed at the screen. "No. We were." My mother. She didn't say a word, just stood behind the curtain rosary wrapped tight around her fist like she was praying the truth away. And Ethan, he looked at me, the way someone looks at a stranger who smells bad in an elevator. Cold, impatient. I turned to him. "You know I wouldn't." He cut me off. "Just leave Nathan." Before Dad calls the cops, he meant it. They all did. So I packed. No yelling. No crying. A few books. My notes. The red folder that still had my research proposal in it. I stepped out onto the porch, The door didn't slam, it just clicked, like a final punctuation mark. They didn't tell anyone I left, didn't answer when friends called, didn't even come to the university to collect the honors cord I left behind. They deleted me, like a failed file, corrupted, removed, forgotten. And yet here I am, 15 years later, in a courtroom where my brother is on trial for erasing someone else's truth. Funny, isn't it? The things we call failure, sometimes they're just beginnings in disguise. There was no suitcase, no duffel bag. No one said, "Do you need a ride somewhere?" There was just me, a canvas backpack from high school frayed at the bottom, 3 shirts, a toothbrush, a notebook, and a red folder with my name scratched out in pen. It wasn't even that late. The Texas sun had just dipped below the rooftops, but the air was heavy, the kind of heat that sticks behind your ears, the kind that makes silence louder. I stood at the edge of the porch for a second, waiting for anything. A word, a look, even a slammed door. Nothing. The only sound was the squeak of the screen door behind me closing by itself. I walked to the sidewalk, still holding my house key in my fist, even though I already knew it wouldn't fit the lock anymore. A neighbor across the street watered his lawn. He looked up, then looked down. Didn't wave. The world wasn't angry at me. It just didn't see me anymore. I got to the end of the block before I stopped and turned around. The porch light was off. The living room window still glowed soft yellow, spilling onto the blinds. Inside, my father was probably polishing the glass, where I used to put my fingerprints. My mother whispering apologies to saints who never listened. Ethan checking the news to make sure my name hadn't dragged his down with it. I stared at that house, the one where I learned to write, to pray, to believe I mattered, and I told myself something I still remember word for word. If they don't open the door, now don't ever knock again. I turned, kept walking. No tears, no music swelling in the background, just the sound of my own footsteps, and the growing certainty that whatever was ahead of me was already more honest than what I left behind. The Greyhound bus rattled like it was falling apart in slow motion. Midnight. Just me and 6 other passengers too quiet to matter. I sat in the back by the window, didn't look outside, didn't care where we were headed. Somewhere north, somewhere colder. My fingers dug through the backpack searching. Not for comfort, just for proof that I'd once existed. I found it a folded paper envelope with a red string tie. Inside my birth certificate, my student ID, a picture of me at 13 in a suit too big, smiling like I meant it. I held them like they were evidence, like I was about to try myself in court, and then I tore them. Not out of rage, but with the precision of someone dissecting a lie, piece by piece. Birth certificate first. That name, Nathan Elijah Cortez, splitting right down the middle. Then the photo, then the ID. I tore until the seat around me looked like a crime scene made of paper, and in the middle of it, I pulled out the one thing I hadn't touched since that night. My father's pocket watch. Silver. Heavy. Worn from decades of pride and polish. He'd left it on my graduation bed 3 weeks before the video. No note. Just the watch. Back then, I thought it meant something. That maybe deep down he believed in me. That he still saw me. I opened it. It had stopped ticking. No surprise. I wrapped it in a sock and stuffed it at the bottom of my bag. Didn't throw it out. Didn't wear it. Just buried it like a name I couldn't carry anymore, but wasn't ready to kill. That was the night I erased myself, not out of shame, but to make space for someone else. Someone I hadn't met yet. I chose the name Noel Ramos on the back of a diner napkin. I was sitting in a bus terminal outside Albuquerque, drinking a coffee that tasted like burnt water. I needed something that sounded plain, untraceable. something that wouldn't echo back if someone yelled it in a crowd. Noel, because it was close to Nathan but not enough to haunt me. Ramos, because it was the name on the ID I bought for $70 from a guy named Tito. I arrived in Denver just after sunrise. The air was thinner, the cold sharper. Everything felt too new and too indifferent to care who I used to be. That was good. I didn't want to be remembered. I wanted to disappear the right way this time. The woman at the job board didn't ask for much. Name, I said, Noel Ramos. And just like that, he existed. No one asked where I was from. No one mentioned the Cortez family. No one looked at me twice. The city swallowed me whole. I moved into a shared room in a rundown building that smelled like wet wood and someone else's regret. My bed was a thin mattress on the floor. No sheets, just 2 shirts rolled up as a pillow. I worked where I could. Busboy at a taqueria. Late shift at a gas station. Floor mopper at a medical clinic downtown. Every night I wrote notes to myself in code, a fake alphabet I'd made up as a kid. Each letter was a symbol. Each symbol was a secret. Because if anyone found my notebook, I wanted them to think it was gibberish. But it wasn't. It was my story. In a language only I could read, because I wasn't ready to be known, not yet. I had to earn my face again before I let the world look me in the eye. The first place I slept in Denver wasn't a room. It was the space behind the kitchen freezer of a Mexican diner on Colfax Avenue. The owner didn't know. The night cook did, but he didn't care. He just said, "Don't snore too loud, or you'll scare the rats." There was a flattened cardboard box I used as a mat. A rolled-up hoodie became a pillow. The hum of the walk-in freezer was constant. It almost sounded like breathing. I showered in the employee bathroom with a jug of cold water and paper towels. My clothes dried under the vent overnight. Sometimes they didn't. So I smelled like someone no one wanted to ask about. Each shift I scrubbed the same grill tops, mopped the same grease-slicked tiles. I memorized orders, learned the regulars' names, but no one learned mine. Because I never told it. I was just that quiet guy. Noel. Maybe. The only time I felt close to being real was in the bathroom stall. 3rd stall, back corner. Between the hours of 2 and 4 a.m., I sat there with a copy of the Colorado Municipal Code printed off the library printer. It cost me $6 to print 20 pages. I had to choose which sections to study. So I picked the ones about housing rights, tenant law, sanctuary city statutes. Because even if I had no bed, I still wanted to understand what it meant to protect one. There was no dream of revenge, no blueprint for redemption. Not then. There was only survival and the quiet urge to learn something that couldn't be taken from me. I ducked security cameras, kept my head down, changed sidewalks if I saw anyone in uniform. Because even if I had a new name, I still carried the fear like a second skin. It's a strange thing being invisible. It hurts less than being hated. But it still leaves bruises you can't point to. I remember one night I'd just finished scraping burned cheese off a pan that had probably never been fully clean. I stepped outside. The air smelled like rain and bleach. I looked up at the dark sky above the alley, and for the first time in months, I whispered to myself, I'm still here. Not proud. Not strong. Just present. And sometimes that's enough to get you to the next morning. It was a Tuesday night. Late. The kind of night where even the streetlights looked tired. I was mopping the hallway of the free clinic downtown. Same as usual. Same scent of rubbing alcohol and old linoleum. That's when I heard yelling. Spanish. Male voice. Sharp. I turned the corner and saw her, a small woman clutching a little girl, maybe 4 or 5. The girl wore a pink sweater with one sleeve torn. The woman looked terrified. Standing in front of them was a man in a cheap uniform badge clipped to his belt, holding a clipboard and barking, "Firma aquí." It's already processed. Just sign it. She didn't move, didn't blink, just trembled. She didn't understand. Or maybe she did and knew that signing meant being taken. I don't know what made me step forward. I just knew no one else would. I said, "She's not signing that." The man turned, looked me up and down, mop still in my hand. "Who the hell are you?" I paused. Then lied. Clearly, cleanly. "I'm her legal advocate. You're violating due process." He narrowed his eyes. "I've got clearance." I shrugged. "Your paperwork doesn't. That form's outdated. Your data entry is wrong. She has a pending asylum claim. Check again." I had no idea if any of that was true, but I said it like I'd sworn it in court. He hesitated, grumbled, made a call he didn't finish, then turned and left. Just like that. The woman didn't thank me. She didn't have to. She just collapsed into the chair, still holding her daughter like armor. I stood there, heart racing, hands shaking. Not because I was scared, but because it worked. That lie, that voice, that confidence. I hadn't used it in years, not since before they erased me. But it was still there, like a switch, like muscle memory, like the law was still somewhere inside me waiting for a moment like this. Later that night, I sat in the supply closet with my notebook, and I wrote one sentence in code: "A lie that protects isn't a lie, it's armor." The next day, they called me into the office. That usually meant trouble. Late cleaning, missing supplies. Maybe someone finally figured out I wasn't exactly on the books. I stepped inside expecting a lecture. What I found instead was a man in a charcoal sweater, sleeves rolled up, sipping bad coffee like it was fine wine. He didn't look like a cop, didn't act like a bureaucrat. But he watched me the way people do when they've already read the answer and just want to see how long it takes you to say it. He held out a hand. "Gabriel Marin," he said. "Director of Proyecto Libre. I run immigrant legal services across 5 counties." I didn't shake his hand, just nodded. He gestured for me to sit. I stayed standing. He said I heard about last night. "You told a DHS contractor that the forms were invalid." I kept quiet. He smiled. "You were right, by the way." "Well, mostly. I asked you here to report me." He chuckled. "I'm here to hire you." I blinked, still didn't sit. He leaned forward. "Most people, when they lie, they do it to protect themselves. But you lied with precision, with intent, and not for yourself." Pause. "You know what that tells me?" I didn't answer. He did. "That tells me you were trained for this, and that something, or someone, broke that path." The silence thickened. He let it, then slid a folder across the table. Job offer. Entry level. Nothing glamorous. But real. Legal. Documented. He added, "You won't clean floors. You'll translate. Shadow. Learn. Then we'll see." I didn't say yes, not out loud. I just took the folder. And for the first time in years, someone offered me a future without needing my past. They started me with tea. Every morning, I filled paper cups with bitter green tea or lukewarm coffee from a machine older than most interns. I'd place them gently on desks, cluttered with manila folders, broken pens, half-finished case briefs. No one looked up. No one said, "Thank you." That was fine, because while they talked, I listened. While they typed, I read upside down. The language of law is coded, but I already knew how to read between lines. I'd spent years decoding silence. This was easier. Proyecto Libre was housed in a converted dental clinic. Reception still had the plastic plants and scratched-up play area. But every wall was lined with shelves of asylum applications, birth records, deportation notices. They didn't trust me yet. Of course not. I was the new guy. No resume, no story, no past. Just hands that cleaned well and eyes that never wandered. They had me organize supply closets, pick up lunch, take out paper bins. The toilet backed up on my third day. I fixed it. No one asked how I knew how. But the truth is, when you've been invisible, you learn to repair things quietly. And while I scrubbed, while I fetched, I memorized. Names, patterns. The difference between a Form I-589 and a G-28. Which judge ruled harsh. Which lawyer always filed late. Which families never got callbacks. And then one day, I heard it. A junior paralegal muttering, "We need someone to sort these affidavits. But no one has time." I said I can help. They hesitated. She looked me over, then handed me the stack. I took it without a word, and for the next 4 hours, I sat in the hallway by the printer and sorted them by date, language, and urgency perfectly. No mistakes. No shortcuts. She came back, eyebrows raised. "Where'd you learn to organize case files?" I said, "Bathroom floor. Every night for a year." She laughed. Thought I was joking. I didn't correct her. Because sometimes, you don't need people to believe your story. You just need them to start watching what you do next. I started staying late, long after the last phone call, after the last light shut off down the hall. I told them I was reorganizing files, which was true, but not the full truth. What I was really doing was reading everything they never had time to read. Old case summaries, rejected proposals, funding applications no one followed up on, memos from City Hall buried in email threads no one finished. I learned the language of power in those quiet hours. How to frame urgency without sounding desperate. How to use statistics like armor. How to ask for help without giving away leverage. Every night I took a few blank sheets from the printer, drafted policy suggestions, outlined systems for triaging cases faster, redesigned intake forms in Excel. No one asked me to. I just did it. I left them in mailboxes without signing my name. By the third week, someone pinned one to the bulletin board with a sticky note that said, "Who wrote this? Use this format next time." They never found out it was me. I didn't want credit. I just wanted to be useful again. To matter quietly. One night I brought in a piece of paper I'd kept folded in my pocket for weeks. 4 words, black marker, all caps. "Let the work speak first." I taped it to the wall above the shared copier. No initials, no flair. The next morning someone underlined it in red. The day after that, someone added a star next to it. By the end of the week it was laminated. Still no one knew where it came from. But people started quoting it in meetings, started using it to end debates. Let the work speak first, they'd say when politics got in the way, when egos got loud, when tempers threatened progress. And me, I just kept filing, writing, listening, because I wasn't ready to be seen. Not yet. But I was ready to be heard, even if they didn't know it was my voice. There were moments, small ones, where I almost said it, my real name. It never came out, but it got close. Once someone asked, "What's your full name for the training certificate?" I paused, half a second too long. Then I said, "Noel Ramos." Just Noel is fine. She shrugged and moved on. But I stood in that silence for the rest of the day. Another time we were doing intake for a family mother, 2 sons both scared and silent. The little boy couldn't say his name through his tears. I knelt beside him and said, "You don't have to say it now. You get to choose when the world hears it." He looked at me like I gave him permission to exist, and I realized I was talking to both of us, because there's a difference between being erased and choosing to disappear. I chose. But that doesn't mean it didn't hurt. Sometimes after hours, I'd sit alone in the conference room. I'd open my notebook, the one in code, and I'd write my real name once. Only once. Then scratch it out until the page bled ink. Not because I hated it, but because I couldn't trust what people would do with it. What if they heard Nathan Cortez and remembered the video, the scandal, the whispers, the shame that wasn't mine, but stuck to my skin like oil. What if they didn't remember the video, but remembered my family instead? The powerful last name, the prosecutor brother, the decorated father. What if they assumed I came from pride, not from ashes? Worse, what if they looked me up, saw who I used to be, and decided that who I am now doesn't count? So no, I didn't say it. I let them call me Noel. Let them keep guessing. Because not all truths are ready to be known, and not every name deserves to be returned right away. One day, maybe, when I earn it, on my own terms. But until then, I'll let the work speak first. It started with a typo. A draft memo from a city council aide full of errors and contradictions. Someone left it on the copier. I wasn't supposed to read it, but I did. It was a proposal for a temporary housing protection ordinance meant to shield undocumented tenants from wrongful eviction during ICE raids. In theory, it was brilliant. In practice, it was chaos. Vague language, no enforcement mechanism, no budget logic. I brought it home, sat at my wobbly kitchen table in the dark, and rewrote it. Line by line, I cut fluff, built safeguards, tied each section to legal precedent, drafted footnotes referencing state rulings from as far back as 2004. I knew exactly what to say because I'd lived the gaps in that law. I didn't sleep that night. By dawn, the document was airtight. I printed it, tucked it into a plain envelope, and slid it under Gabriel Marin's door. No name, no message, just the work. A week passed, then 2. No reaction. Until one Friday morning during our team debrief, Gabriel stepped into the room holding a thick folder. The city's going to vote on a revised version of the housing proposal, he said. He smiled. Someone cleaned it up for them. No idea who. But it's damn good. Everyone clapped, joked about the policy fairy, said we should thank whoever made them look smart. I said nothing, just sipped my tea and nodded. Later that afternoon, I saw the official release. The revised draft had made it into the council agenda. At the bottom of the document, it read, "Prepared in consultation with Proyecto Libre staff." No individual name, no byline. But I didn't care, because the protections were real now. People wouldn't lose their homes for hiding. Families wouldn't be split over technicalities. And I knew that somewhere someone would sleep better because I stayed up that night. That was my first law, written in silence, signed by no one, but living in the city code, carrying my fingerprints, even if no one saw them. That night, I went home, pulled the folded paper off my wall, and wrote underneath it in pen, "Let the work speak, and let the law carry your voice." There was a time Ethan couldn't walk into a grocery store without someone shaking his hand. District Attorney Cortez saw you on the news. Good man. He was the family's pride, graduated top of his class, clerked for a federal judge, prosecuted gangs, cartels, and tax fraud like he was born to do it. My father used to say, "That boy's spine is made of steel." Turns out it was paper. Folded just right. And now, unfolding in public. The courtroom was packed. Local media national outlets, 3 microphones clipped to the bench for overflow audio. The caption outside the courthouse read, "State vs. Ethan Cortez. Allegations of evidence tampering in asylum hearings." Not a scandal they could bury. Not this time. The prosecutor read the charges slowly, deliberately. Ethan was accused of deliberately withholding key documents in at least 3 asylum cases, documents that would have protected the applicants. Instead, 2 families were deported. One mother never saw her children again. His defense claimed administrative oversight, a technical error, someone else's mistake. But I'd read the file. I'd seen the digital signatures, the redactions, the timelines that didn't line up. And I knew It wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. The kind of choice you make when you think no one's watching, when you believe your badge is armor and your name is enough. I sat in the back row. No announcement. No escort. No camera crew. Just me. And the weight of a last name they tried to delete from memory. Ethan didn't see me at first, but my mother did. She turned her head just slightly, and when her eyes met mine, her hand went to her chest, same as the night they threw me out, still clutching that cross like it could undo everything we never said. She didn't smile, didn't frown, just froze, like the sight of me fractured something fragile inside her. And in that moment, I wasn't her son. I was the return of the ghost they swore they'd never see again. A courtroom full of strangers leaned forward to see what she saw. A man they once erased now returned in silence, not to speak, but to witness. I never planned to run for office. In fact, I avoided cameras for so long, I forgot what my own face looked like in good lighting. But the day the city passed, the housing protection law, the one I ghost wrote, a woman stopped me on the sidewalk. She said, "You work for Proyecto Libre, right? That new law. My sister got to stay because of it. That was you, wasn't it?" I didn't answer. She smiled anyway. Whoever did it, they should run for something. 2 weeks later I filed. Independent. No party endorsement. No donors with six-figure checks. Just me. A handful of former clients who believed I was the real thing. And one slogan, "Let the work speak first." There were no posters with my face, no yard signs with toothy grins, just text. Simple. White on black. Policies, not personality. I refused interviews, declined televised debates. I wasn't being arrogant. I just knew what the media wanted, a story. Preferably one with scandal redemption or a tearful confession. I had none of those for sale. Instead, I showed up, to town halls, to food banks, to shelters. I spoke to people in line, not on stage. And when I spoke, I asked more than I answered. At first, they called me the ghost candidate. One op-ed said, "You can't vote for a man you've never seen." But then the policies started circulating. Free legal clinics in immigrant neighborhoods, mandatory response timelines for public housing agencies, scholarships for undocumented students. They saw the work, and for some people that was enough. When I won some, reporters complained. Who is he really? Where did he come from? And to that, I offered only one thing, a press release that read, "Governors don't need to be icons. They need to be instruments. My face is irrelevant. My work is not." That was 2 years ago. They know my name now. They still don't know my whole story. And that's how I like it. Because I didn't run to be remembered. I ran to make things hard to forget. The judge entered with the kind of authority that doesn't need to raise its voice. Black robe, short gray hair, eyes like sharpened glass. I knew her name. Audrey Jameson. Federal bench. Former civil rights litigator. Respected? Feared. Exact. I'd seen her once at a national conference for governors. We never spoke. But I remembered her cadence, how she paused between each sentence, like she was chiseling them into stone. She took her seat, adjusted her glasses, glanced at the front row, then the back. Her gaze swept past reporters, clerks, empty chairs, paused, then returned to me. Slowed, narrowed. She leaned forward slightly, voice steady but softer than protocol. "Wait." Another pause. "Is that?" Governor Cortez. Everything stopped. Papers froze mid-turn, pens halted, chairs creaked but didn't move. Reporters blinked, then scrambled. Cameras twisted toward the back. Phones clicked on. My brother turned, his mouth parted, eyes wide, not angry, not ashamed, just stunned. Like I was a ghost. He forgot how to forget. And my mother, she didn't turn. She didn't need to. Her hand flew to her chest, just like it had the day I left, and she whispered something. Maybe a prayer, maybe a curse. The judge composed herself, cleared her throat. Proceed. But the air didn't reset. It stayed fractured, tilted. The court reporter looked back twice. One juror bit her lip. A clerk dropped his pen. I sat still. Didn't wave, didn't nod, didn't smile. Just let my name sit in the air like smoke from a fire they thought had burned out long ago. I wasn't there to speak, or forgive, or avenge. I was there to witness. And sometimes that's more powerful than speaking ever could be. She turned. Slowly. Like her neck remembered who I was before her heart did. Elena Cortez. My mother still wore her hair pinned tight, still wore beige like a uniform, still wrapped her rosary twice around her fingers, like she thought God listened harder when she pulled tighter. Her eyes met mine. But they didn't plead, didn't soften, didn't blink. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. Because what I saw in her stare wasn't grief. It was disruption. I wasn't supposed to be there. Not in that courtroom. Not on that side of the story. Not as someone the judge recognized. Not as someone the cameras turned toward. For 15 years, she'd kept a narrative alive, one where I had vanished because I couldn't handle pressure, where I had embarrassed the family, where I was better left unmentioned. Now, I existed again. Not through apology, but through power. And that is the hardest kind of return for people who rely on silence. Her lips moved not a word, just the shape of my name, without the breath to carry it. I didn't respond, didn't shift, didn't acknowledge the pull she thought still worked on me. Because the truth is, the day they locked the door behind me, I stopped being their son. Not out of anger, but out of necessity. And she knew it. She gripped her cross tighter, as if the beads might rewind time, as if faith could replace memory. But I had no interest in the past she prayed for, only in the justice playing out in front of us. So I looked away. Not down, not up, just away. Because there are some looks that aren't meant to be met. Only survived. The headlines didn't take long. 48 hours, maybe less. Governor Cortez attends brother's trial. Family tensions surface. From exile to executive. What's the real story behind Nathan Cortez? And then the one I expected most: video resurfaces of Cortez in college scandal. They found it. The clip. Grainy, compressed, time-stamped from over a decade ago. I hadn't seen it since the night my father threw my diploma at the wall. It played on loop on 2 cable networks by morning, muted with experts narrating shame into every second. Unbecoming, inappropriate, questionable judgment. They invited my old classmates to weigh in. Some smiled like they knew something. Others played surprised. And my inbox filled journalists, podcasts, columnists, damage control consultants. All of them asking the same thing without saying it directly. Do you want to explain yourself, Governor? I didn't, because the truth is, I didn't know them my past. Not anymore. The story wasn't new, only recycled, resold. And this time, I wasn't the scared kid refreshing Twitter every 5 seconds. I wasn't the name they could amputate from a family tree. I was the one who'd passed legislation, the one who'd rebuilt housing protections, the one who knew that if you wait long enough, scandal becomes whether something that passes but doesn't define the land it rains on. My staff panicked. Should we release a statement? We can threaten a defamation suit. Maybe do a sit-down interview the moment I said no. To all of it. Then I walked into my office, closed the door, and stared out the window while the headlines burned across 1,000 screens. And I whispered something just loud enough for myself to hear. Let them look. I've survived being seen before. The headlines were still spinning when I opened the drawer. Bottom, left. Always locked. even though no one else had the key. Inside, wrapped in a thin, faded sock, was the pocket watch. Silver. Scratched. Still heavy in the hand like regret with a hinge. I hadn't touched it in years. Didn't forget it was there. I just didn't want to feel what came with it. My father gave it to me the week before everything collapsed. No note, no words, just the weight of inheritance without affection. When I held it now, I noticed something I hadn't before. There were no hands. The glass face was intact. But the hour and minute hands gone. Had they fallen off? Were they ever there to begin with? Back then, I thought it stopped ticking because of a broken mechanism. But now I realized maybe it was never meant to tell time. Maybe it was just meant to sit still. Like the version of me they wanted, silent, unmoving, ornamental. I turned it over. Felt the inscription I'd memorized long ago. What you carry is who you become. I used to believe that. Now, I know better. Sometimes you carry things just to prove you can eventually let them go. I placed it gently on the desk, didn't wind it, didn't put it away. I just left it out where anyone walking in could see it. Not as a tribute, not as a relic, but as a reminder that some clocks don't need to tick to tell you how far you've come. The message came at 11:43 p.m. No greeting, no context, just one line. You should talk to the federal prosecutor. Calm this down before it spirals. It was from Ethan. Same number, same tone. No apology. No how are you. Not even a half-hearted line about family. Just a command, as if we were still under the same roof, still following the same rules, still pretending he was the one who made sense of chaos. I stared at the screen for a full minute. Didn't move, didn't blink. He hadn't said my name in 15 years. Not once. But now he didn't need to, because to him I was useful again. Not as a brother, but as leverage. That was the thing with Ethan. He never raised his voice, never cursed, never hit. But he knew how to cut with silence, with omission, with timing, the kind of cruelty that dresses like calm. I didn't reply, just locked the phone, set it face down on the desk, and reached for the glass of water I hadn't touched in hours. The office was quiet, only the soft hum of city lights against the windows. I looked over at the watch, still resting on the desk, still without hands, still heavy, and I realized something. Some people ask for your help, not because they trust you, but because they assume you'll still care. Ethan hadn't reached out to make things right. He reached out because he thought I was still the boy waiting for his approval. But I wasn't. Not anymore. So I finished my water, turned off the light, and walked out without taking the phone with me. I didn't hold a press conference the next day. Didn't tweet. Didn't give a quote to the papers frothing at the mouth for a reaction. Instead, I scheduled a policy announcement. No fancy title. No hint of what it was about. Just a line at the bottom of the notice. Remarks from the governor on ethics reform. The media showed up anyway. So did the protesters. So did a few curious aides who had never seen me angry, and still wouldn't. I stood behind the podium. No flag backdrop. No family photo in frame. Just me, a microphone, and a wall behind me, covered in artwork drawings from the children of asylum seekers. No one asked where I got them. No one had to. I cleared my throat. No script, just breath and truth. We've all seen how power works, I began. It doesn't always arrive with a badge or a bullet. Sometimes it comes quietly through whispers, through shame, through the people who should protect you, using your past as a leash. I let the pause sit. Let it echo. So today I'm introducing the Witness Protection Integrity Act. Heads snapped up. Pens started moving. Someone in the third row raised a phone to record. This bill makes it a criminal offense to use leaked private materials, intimate media, or family coercion to threaten public officials, whistleblowers, or advocates in civic service. It also allows victims to file civil claims for damages without losing their job, their seat, or their voice. No stammer. No emotion. Just law. I saw reporters exchange glances. They knew exactly what it meant and who it was meant for. But I never said their names. Not Ethan. Not my father. Not even the journalists who made a meal of my past. Because this wasn't revenge. It was reform. It was infrastructure. The legal kind. The emotional kind. I ended simply, we don't shout. We write. We build. And if they want to hear us, they can read. That was all. I stepped down. No questions. No spin. By nightfall, every outlet had their headline. But for once, they weren't writing about the video. They were writing about the bill. And that was the loudest I'd ever been. I arrived 10 minutes early. Not out of eagerness, out of habit. Governors don't walk into rooms late, especially not rooms filled with ghosts. The house looked the same. Same brick. Same porch. Light flickering with that dull yellow hum. But the air smelled different lemon oil in anticipation. Teresa opened the door. My mother. She had on mascara, which was already smudging at the corners. Her voice trembled like she hadn't rehearsed it 50 times in the mirror. Nathan, thank you for coming. I nodded. Didn't say, it's good to be back, because it wasn't. It was just necessary. Inside, everything gleamed. Fresh flowers, polished forks. Even the dinner napkins were folded into crisp triangles. At the end of the table, my chair, reupholstered, new leather, shiny, like they were trying to cover up the splinters. My father Raymond stood tall in a stiff shirt, still pretending his spine was made of principle. Ethan was already seated. Quiet, staring at his plate like it might accuse him. I took my seat. The new cushion hissed a little under my weight. Teresa reached for the wine bottle, then remembered, I don't drink anymore. I made enchiladas, she said your favorite. I let the words float. They landed nowhere. Dinner began. The sounds were metallic. Clinks, scrapes, throats clearing. Remember when you used to draw on the napkins, Teresa said suddenly, voice falsely bright. Even the priest kept one once, I think. Raymond nodded like a politician. Your campaign posters. Very professional. I read one of your speeches. Quite sharp. I let the silence answer. No small talk would patch this house. Finally, Ethan spoke. I know I messed up. I never thought it would go this far. There it was. Not regret. Just consequence. Then the shift. We were thinking, Teresa said, fingers twitching near mine maybe. You could say a few words to the federal prosecutor. Nothing formal. Just family helping family. I put down my fork. The sound echoed like a gavel. If I weren't the governor, I asked, eyes steady, would I still be your blood silence? Not even the clock dared tick. I stood. The new leather squeaked again. Everything in this house had been scrubbed, buffed, painted except the truth. I kept your name, I said softly, but I built my life without you in it. I left without dessert, without hugs, without closure, because sometimes walking out again is the real return. The room didn't breathe, not after I asked the question. If I weren't the governor, would I still be your son? My voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. Truth doesn't shout. It only waits. Across from me, my mother froze. Her lips parted, then closed again, like something inside her wanted to answer, but couldn't afford the truth. Raymond gripped his wineglass too tightly. The man who once threw me out without a word now couldn't form one. And Ethan looked down at his plate, like it might still save him. Not one of them said yes. Not one of them said no. Just silence, the kind that burns louder than any scream. I scanned their faces, not with anger, Not even disappointment, just finality. It was like looking at a childhood home after it had been sold. Familiar shapes, unfamiliar meaning. I pushed back my chair. The new leather still squeaked. Funny how they fixed that. They fixed everything, except themselves. I stood up slowly, deliberately, like a man rising from his own grave. My napkin fell to the floor. No one picked it up. Raymond tried to speak, but only managed a half-formed grunt. "You didn't lose me," I said, eyes sharp. "You erased me." I turned toward the door. Teresa whispered behind me, something between a prayer and a whimper. "Nathan." We didn't know. I paused, hand on the frame, back still turned. "You knew. You just didn't care to ask." And with that I left. Not just the house. I left the last sliver of hope that maybe they'd changed. I didn't go home that night. Home was a word that stopped meaning anything a long time ago. I went back to the office. Empty. Silent. Just like I needed. I turned on the lamp. Soft glow. No noise. And there, in the bottom drawer where I left it years ago, was the watch. The same watch my father gave me at 15. Back when I still thought love looked like approval. It had no battery, no hands, no time. Frozen in a moment long buried, I held it in my palm, heavy even without function, like it still remembered everything. Every second I waited for someone to believe me. Every minute I spent wondering if I was the one who broke it all. Every hour I told myself not to hate them. I looked at it for a long time. Then I stood up, grabbed my coat, walked. No security, no assistant, just me, and time cradled in my hand. I returned to that same dining table, the Reyes house. Lights still on, dinner plates still untouched. The door creaked. No one had locked it. Teresa sat alone, eyes swollen but no tears left. Ethan was gone. Raymond nowhere in sight. I didn't say anything, just walked to the head of the table, the place he always sat, the seat I was never allowed to touch, and I placed the watch right there, gently, like a relic. She looked up. Why, she asked. I met her eyes, because that was always his time. Now it's mine. Then I left. The door clicked behind me. Quiet. Like closure. That night I didn't feel anger, or grief, just a quiet kind of freedom. Because some things don't need revenge. They just need to be returned so they no longer weigh on you. I didn't look back. Not at the hallway I used to run through. Not at the portraits that never included me. Not at the woman sitting at the table clutching a name she thought I still needed. I stepped onto the porch. Same creak in the floorboard like it remembered me. But this time, it didn't stop me. The air was sharp. Denver's winter was just a whisper in the air, cold enough to make you feel alive, but not enough to make you stay. I walked, past the hedges he trimmed every Sunday, past the gate they used to lock behind me. Freedom doesn't come with applause. It comes in silence, in the weight you no longer carry, in the name you no longer beg to hear. And I realized being accepted back was never the point, because I was never truly invited in. I was tolerated, shaped, silenced, but never seen. Now I see myself, clearly, fully. Enough. The house grew smaller behind me, not because I was far, but because it had already shrunk in my memory. They say family is forever, but so is harm. So is silence. So is pretending. I stopped at the corner, looked up. City lights blinked like quiet approval. I breathed in. Not the past. Not revenge. Just air. Just now. I didn't need them to say sorry, or come chasing, or realize what they lost. That part of me, the boy waiting on the steps with a diploma and no applause, he's not here anymore. I buried him between forgotten birthdays and unanswered calls. What rose in his place was a man who walked away with nothing and made nothing mean something. No, I didn't look back, because I wasn't leaving them behind. I was finally walking toward myself. It started with one email. No subject, no sender. Just an attachment named, "Remember Me, Ziv." I stared at it for a full minute. Didn't click, didn't flinch. I'd seen ghosts before. This one just wore a new suit. By noon, the flood had come. Grainy screenshots from my old college inbox. A PDF of a half-finished story I once submitted to a forgotten blog. A selfie of me crying on the floor of a shelter time-stamped 2:03 a.m. One message from Ethan circled in red. She leaked it herself. Check her Dropbox. Except I was never a she, and it was never my Dropbox. The images spread like fire through dry grass. Reddit threads, news outlets, Twitter mobs. Headlines didn't even wait for facts. Who is Noel Ramos? Really, governor, lead about past. From shelter to seat, fabricated or fierce. My comms director burst in, face pale as paper. They're saying you orchestrated your own fall to stage a rise. I leaned back, fingers steepled. Let them say it. But sir, your past is turning into a weapon. I nodded. That was always the plan, just never mine. It wasn't about the files. It was about the smell of blood. The moment they thought I was weak, they stopped whispering and started digging. And someone handed them the shovel. Every interview I never gave was now being filled in by strangers. Every pause I'd once taken was being treated as a lie. Old roommates, former co-workers, an ex who barely knew how I took my coffee now claiming to know my soul. They pulled out quotes from decade-old emails, screenshots of notes scribbled at 2 a.m., voice clips out of context. But they made one mistake. They assumed I'd be ashamed. They assumed I'd run. Again. I walked into my office the next morning, sat at my desk, opened every file, every photo, every note, and printed them. All. Each one in black and white, each one placed in a binder, each binder labeled with a date I never forgot. They wanted a scandal. I was building an archive. Because the truth wasn't just messy, it was mine. And they were about to learn I don't panic. I document. When the phone rang, I let it buzz. 4 times, then 5. Then silence. I knew the number. Knew the voice behind it. Knew the weight behind that silence after the tone. It wasn't a reporter. Wasn't a political opponent. It was him. The man who once changed the locks on his son and said, "You've embarrassed the family enough." And now he was calling. The next morning, I found the second leak, buried beneath technical metadata in one of the zips. A trail. Not sophisticated, not sloppy either. But it reeked of someone old school. Someone who didn't understand that deleting a folder doesn't delete a motive. His name was embedded in the file history. M. Reyes, admin, my father. He didn't send the files himself. Of course not. He passed them to someone, fed the fire hoping I'd burn quietly. But I didn't burn. I brewed coffee, sat in my chair, and began another draft of my judicial ethics reform bill. When my team asked if we should call a press conference, I said no. When my legal aid suggested suing for libel, I said no. When my cousin from Texas asked if I'd confront him directly, I smiled. No. You see, people like him expect war. They expect noise. They expect their target to lash out, scream, threaten. But when you do none of that, they start unraveling. Because silence from a man like me isn't retreat. It's restraint. It's a signal that I've already moved to the next play before they've even realized the board has changed. And so I kept moving. I visited a women's shelter that afternoon. Spoke about dignity, not redemption. I reviewed housing policies for post-incarceration reintegration. Didn't mention my name once. I submitted the Justice Protection Bill to the State Ethics Council. No photo, no press release, only the work. By Thursday, my father called again. 3 times. No voicemail. On Friday, I received a handwritten letter. No return address. But I knew the handwriting. Still sharp. Still rigid. Inside 5 words. It wasn't supposed to spread. I folded it neatly, slipped it into the binder labeled Year 17 Containment. Didn't frame it. Didn't burn it. Just filed it away. Because I don't yell. I don't threaten. I document. And people like him, they don't fear exposure. They fear being ignored. There's something I never told anyone. Not in campaign speeches. Not in interviews. Not even in therapy. It's this. For a long time, I didn't think I deserved any of it. Not the office. Not the title. Not the respect. Not even the quiet. Because when your own blood calls you dirty enough times, you start to believe maybe you are. That video, I didn't film it. I didn't leak it. I didn't ask to be recorded. But it didn't matter. In the silence that followed, my body became a battleground for someone else's shame. And the worst part, I took it on. Wore it. Like it was mine. I remember sleeping on a floor behind a diner, cold linoleum under my cheek, and thinking, maybe this is where people like me end up. Not because I broke the law, but because I broke their illusion. And that was the real sin. For years, I kept my head down, took the back exits, used a fake name, ate with my back to the wall. Not because I feared danger, but because I feared recognition. Because if someone pointed and said, "Aren't you the guy in that clip?" I didn't know what I'd say. Would I defend myself? Would I explain? Would I pretend I didn't know what they were talking about? Or worse, would I nod? Would I accept that image as truth? It took years before I realized clean doesn't mean untouched. It doesn't mean perfect. It means unbought, unbroken, unafraid to own your full story no matter who tried to write it for you. So, no, I'm not ashamed of who I was. And I don't need to be scrubbed clean to lead. Because if my hands carry scars, it only means I kept climbing. And I didn't claw my way out of silence just to whisper when it mattered. That morning, they said I shouldn't go on stage. Security briefed me twice. My team begged me to cancel. The leaks had made me vulnerable, they said. But I wasn't born into safety. I was born into scrutiny. And I'd rather face 100 flashing cameras than live one more day ashamed of surviving. So I stepped onto the podium. No teleprompter. No flag behind me. Just a black suit, a deep breath, and a storm brewing over Denver's skyline. I looked out at the crowd. Some came to support. Some came to mock. Some came to watch me fall. And I started with this. If you're here expecting me to defend my past, you're in the wrong place. Silence. If you're here hoping I'll apologize for being violated, for being discarded by my own blood, for rebuilding my life without asking for permission, you'll leave disappointed. A murmur ran through the press pit. I leaned in. Power doesn't frighten me. But silence. Silence nearly killed me. So here's what I came to say. To anyone who's ever been shamed for surviving. We don't owe the world a clean version of our pain. Today, I introduce the Survivor Integrity Act, a policy that protects public servants, whistleblowers, and civilians from retaliation via leaked private content. From digital sabotage disguised as accountability. We are not our worst moments, especially when those moments weren't ours to begin with. I paused. A gust of wind howled through the mic. To those who tried to shame me back into silence, I'm still standing. Not because I was unscathed, but because I refused to be erased. I ended it simply. If dignity is a fire, then today I lit the match myself. As I stepped down, no one dared ask questions. No shouted accusations. Just the sound of something shifting. maybe in them. Definitely in me. I was halfway through my speech at the South Denver Community Forum when I saw it. Second row, 2 seats from the center aisle, a woman in a pale blue coat, both hands clasped around a small cloth. At first I didn't flinch. I thought she was another supporter, someone's grandmother. But then she looked up, and I saw her eyes. They were smaller than I remembered, not weak, but folded inward, like someone who had been watching herself disappear for years. It was my mother. She didn't wave, didn't call my name, didn't mouth, "I'm sorry." She just sat there, like a visitor in a church she once belonged to. I kept speaking. My words didn't stumble. "You don't need the world to clap for your healing," I told the crowd. "Sometimes it's enough just to know you're not bleeding anymore." I looked out again. She was still there. No one around her seemed to notice. No one whispered. No one pointed. That's when I realized she had come as a stranger. She had chosen to come not as the governor's mother, but as a citizen. Afterward, when the crowd filtered out and the staff collected name tags, I returned to the podium to grab my notes. That's when I saw it. Folded neatly on my chair, a handkerchief. Faded, pink embroidered initials, still legible NDR. My childhood cloth. The one she used to tuck into my pocket on the first day of school. The one she took from my suitcase the night they sent me away. I hadn't seen it in over 15 years. No note, no number. Just that small square of fabric. I didn't chase after her. Didn't ask the security cameras where she'd gone. Didn't text back the number she once called from. I just stood there with that piece of cotton between my fingers, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a child with no home. I felt like a man who had rebuilt one inside himself. After the speech, I stayed behind, shook hands, signed a few posters, took a photo with a janitor who whispered, "My daughter watched you on TV. She thinks you're made of steel." I smiled. I wasn't made of steel, but I had been forged in fire. As I packed up, a small hand tugged at my coat sleeve, barely reached my elbow. A boy, maybe 7. Big eyes. Face half curious, half afraid. He wore a red hoodie 2 sizes too big, probably passed down. Probably loved. He didn't ask for an autograph, didn't ask who I was. He just looked up and said, "Do you have a family?" Simple. Direct. No edges. Just honesty, the kind only kids are brave enough to carry. I paused. All the words I used in legislation and interviews and campaigns, suddenly useless. Because this wasn't a voter. This was a mirror. I crouched down, met him eye level, and said softly, "I had one." Then I lost it. And now, I smiled, not out of pride, but peace. I'm building a new one, with people who choose me, not just people who share my name. He nodded like he understood, like he'd already learned what most adults spend a lifetime denying, that family isn't blood. It's recognition. He handed me a crumpled drawing, a stick figure holding hands with a child, and a sun above their heads. No names, just a big smile on each face. "That's you," he said. "And me." I took the paper, folded it neatly, and for the first time in a long time, maybe ever, I felt seen without condition. Not as a Cortez, not as a governor, just Nathan. And in that moment, it was enough. It was everything. They said I disappeared. Said I dropped out, vanished, broke down. They whispered it in faculty lounges and family reunions I was no longer invited to, and emails that started with such a shame. But the truth is, I was always here. I didn't vanish. I adapted. I didn't fall. I recalibrated. When I slept behind dumpsters, I still breathed. When I scrubbed dishes with bleach-burned hands, I still dreamed. And when I walked through the courthouse the day my brother stood accused, I didn't return. I arrived. Because survival isn't disappearance, it's proof. They erased my name from the dinner table, but it still showed up on ballots. They deleted me from holiday photos, but I still signed bills into law. So no, I never stopped existing. Even in silence, even in shame, even in the split second between heartbreak and grit, I was here. I was the click of keys in the shelter bathroom. I was the ink on an unsigned legal draft. I was the man who chose restraint when revenge would have been easy. And now, I don't need their recognition, because I built something stronger than memory. I built impact. I built shelter for kids whose names were never spoken at roll call. I built rights for women who were told they asked for what happened to them. I built laws for the invisible like I once was. And maybe someday, my name will fade from headlines. Maybe they'll only remember the title, not the story. But I will remember. Because I was never gone. I was just waiting to be seen by the right eyes at the right time on my own terms. And now, I don't need the world to prove I exist. I exist because I never stopped choosing to. The headlines have slowed now. The scandal fatigue set in like it always does. A new face, a new controversy, a new excuse for the world to forget what they couldn't destroy. But they still glance at me. In elevators, in courtrooms, at coffee counters where whispers float heavier than steam. They don't say my name. They don't have to. Some look with curiosity, others with discomfort. A few with admiration they're afraid to admit. But all of them look. And me, I look somewhere else. I look at the single mother with 3 jobs who now has state-funded childcare because of a bill I helped pass. I look at the trans student who walks into school wearing their real name on a badge and isn't asked to explain it. I look at the boy in the red hoodie, drawing me with yellow crayons, because in his world, governors are allowed to smile. I look at my team ex-convicts, single dads, immigrants, kids who aged out of foster care and walked into a second chance they didn't even know existed. And I look in the mirror not to admire what's there, but to honor what stayed. Because it would have been easy to rot from resentment, to let bitterness feed my ambition, to mistake revenge for justice. But I didn't. I chose slower victories, quieter ones, the kind you don't tweet, the kind you don't put in memoirs, the kind you feel when you sleep without checking the locks. And yes, they still look at me. Ethan, Raymond, reporters, voters who still don't know where to place me on their moral compass. But I no longer need their eyes to prove my presence. I've seen myself, and that's enough. So the next time someone turns their head and whispers, "Is that him?" I hope they feel the silence that follows. Not as shame, but as distance, because I'm not there anymore. I'm not in their frame. I'm not waiting for their approval. I've already walked past it, towards something better. Something that doesn't need a last name, a headline, or a seat at anyone's table. Because this time, I bring my own. And when they look at me again, they'll realize I'm not the story they thought I was. I'm the one I chose to write.